When you talk to CEOs right now, one topic that is moving quietly up the agenda is not AI innovation, but AI responsibility.
And that's where a lot of organisations hesitate because they worry so much that it's going to slow them down.
Welcome to AI and the Executive Table, the podcast where AI meets real-world decisions. In this season, I will be joined by Naureen. She has over 20 years experience at the intersection between business, regulation, and governance in large corporations. So she is familiar with the regulated industry, which makes her the perfect addition to this season.
Thank you, Kenza. And this season, we're going to be tackling a topic that a lot of leadership teams are grappling. How to do responsible AI and govern AI in a way that doesn't slow down progress and stifle innovation.
Naureen, you are the expert in this conversation, so I will be the one rather asking the questions. And the first one, I think, is something that is still a confusion in my point of view. So we think of governance, compliance, and risk management sometimes like intertwined, and we don't really differentiate the three concepts. So can you explain those three elements of the whole piece, please?
Great, and it's a good place to start because often we jump straight into talking about the concepts without first baselining our understanding. So the way I think about governance, risk and compliance as they're three separate but interdependent concepts. And so I always like to explain things by way of an analogy. So I'm going to use an analogy of where the company is wanting to build a skyscraper. So think of governance as the scaffolding that is erected to enable the safe and effective construction of this building. It sets the guardrails and it's the structure within which that building can be made. Compliance then is, as anyone who's done any kind of building work themselves at home will know, there's a lot of red tape, a lot of building regulations, planning regulations. So think of compliance as the rules that we have to respect when we're building this skyscraper.
And the boundaries as well.
And the boundaries, so what are the lines that cannot be crossed because to cross those lines would be unlawful, yes. And then the third element, risk management, is as we design that structure, the architects are coming up with the design, they should be designing it in a way that enables that building to be resilient to the threats and the risks of damage or anything that might affect the security of the building, the value of the building. But also, once the building is built and being used, how are we making sure that we're safeguarding that building from future threats and future risks? So those are the three key roles that governance, risk and compliance play, and often why they are used interchangeably, because it's very important that you have a framework where those three parts are working cohesively together.
And why is it, in your point of view, that these three elements, with the AI developments, they really became a boardroom discussion? Why is that?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, definitely for organisations that have a footprint in the EU, we cannot underestimate the impact that the EU AI Act is having on the topic and the escalation of the topic to the C-suite. But I think beyond that, there is a really powerful effect of stakeholder expectations, be those stakeholders your employees, your customers, your regulators, your investors. This is a topic and an area in terms of AI and AI adoption. It promises so much good. There's so much value that everybody is chasing after. but we're chasing after that value in the context of we don't really know these technologies, the pace of development is so fast, the regulation is so complex and evolving and changing, we're not quite sure where that's going to land. So it's we have to navigate that complexity in a way that achieves trust amongst those stakeholders, and I think that's a major reason why it's so important that this topic of responsible AI and AI governance is, an active conversation that happens in the boardroom. And I think the final thing I'd say, and I'd be really interested in your views, because obviously you sit on and have sat on in various committees, executive committees and on boards, the nature of the conversation, like how are boards talking about this?
Well, there is one element that we shouldn't underestimate, and that reaction of governance and compliance will slow the pace. And we can't afford that because the technological development is really quick. So governance is seen as jeopardizing, let's say, that process of development and innovation. And I always wondered how to keep that balance and how to leverage the good parts of the governance to bring in some clarity, and actually for the teams to feel that it is helpful and it's a guidance. So here I'm really curious about the right way to do governance, and this is why I'm really happy that you joined the podcast this season to share your expertise. So what are the best practices?
So I think before we get into what does good governance look like, I think it's just reinforcing the point that you've made there. Governance done well actually is an enabler to innovation. When it is, which is why we talk about by design, this concept of by design is going to come up a lot in our conversations, because when you do design good governance into your operating model, you don't notice that the teams should not be noticing that they are behaving and operating and building, designing and deploying AI technologies in a way that also is achieving, whether it be compliance or other ethical boundaries. It should just happen as part of day-to-day work.
But this sounds like too good to be true. Yeah, exactly. So we have to make it very practical here, because
we have to start with the vision, right? That's the vision. Bringing that back to then, well, practically what does that look like? I think particularly in the context of conversations and that happen in the boardroom, and the value that the executive bring to this topic is, first and foremost, your governance strategy and approach should reflect and enable your business strategy. So where and how and why are you going to be leveraging the AI technologies to deliver your business strategy? And then what do you need to put in place by way of governance to make sure those outcomes are delivered? And in that way, I hope that's a really strong lever, but I hope that in some way shows you why it's so important to talk about governance in the positive sense and in the enablement sense, because that's fundamentally what it's there. It's there to pave the way for the organisation to actually effectively, confidently, with clarity and a sense of purpose, achieve the company's mission, right, with AI.
Yeah.
So I think, I was just going to finish by saying I think that connecting it to the strategy is the first step to a good governance model.
Yeah, and again, this sounds easy. I do like the clarity part of it, because I do believe when people know what they need to do and how, that clarity creates speed. So maybe we can connect it here. So you have a corporate strategy usually, and that is a challenge already to communicate and explain down and cascade, down the hierarchy. And now we're adding another component to it. We're bringing the corporate strategy with our expectation on how this strategy is being executed using the technology and governing that execution. How to make that happen without adding too much complexity, or what is the right point to, to plug it in?
I think there are different organizations take different approaches. One approach that I have found always works well is not to have that as a separate, not to have the governance conversation as a separate, bolted on process. It has to be the conversation that happens within the same room, within the same, with the same group of people who are designing, reviewing, refining that business corporate strategy, or whoever is leading on the AI strategy. It's no different to how, in a digital transformation context, you might have CDOs, so chief data officers, who are in leading the design and execution of the organization's data strategy. They have to make sure that data strategy is serving ultimately the purpose, which is set by, or the mission, which is set by the corporate strategy. So the conversations on governance should be part of those conversations. And I think that's where, if an organization can achieve that, how would you achieve that? You would be equipping the chief data officer, whoever is the C-suite member that's leading your AI strategy, whoever is leading the broader business strategy, the CFO, the CHRO, every member of that C-suite should be thinking in a way that's relevant to their role about governance, about safety, about ethics, about how is this going to be impacting my intern domain strategy, but also our customers, our employees, our investors. It's about making sure that everybody who's in that room to have the conversation anyway is equipped with what's the role of governance here, and what are the questions that I should be asking, what are the conversations I should be triggering and leading, so that we're infusing governance into the conversation that we're here to have anyway, rather than, as you say, we're not adding. We shouldn't be thinking about it as adding on another layer or adding on another strategy. It's not about that for me.
I think one practical thought that pumped into my mind is, within those conversations, just the question, who is responsible of this piece of work? That is actually a governance question already, but we don't think of it as a governance question. But having those roles and responsibilities clear, especially in a new process, that is already benefiting the whole governance framework. And the timing, I think the timing is also really important. You shouldn't maybe do it too early, not to scare people. And at the same time, it shouldn't be too late, because if you have the chaos already, it's really a huge effort to put some structure in that. So in your expertise, what's the right timing? Or is there a right timing at all?
I would say the best approach is a phased approach. Like you say, you start high level, light. Fundamental questions such as the one you posed about who is accountable for what. Not at the detailed level, at the very high level. So who is the person amongst us on the C-suite who is ultimately going to be leading that AI transformation? Okay, that's the person that also needs to care about governance. So have some high level clarity around roles and responsibilities and accountabilities. Then also have some principles, responsible AI principles or AI ethical principles. There's the law, there's the legal line we mustn't cross. But beyond the legal line, what are the non-negotiables for us as an organisation? And usually they will not be coming out of nowhere. They will be coming from your business strategy or in your brand strategy. So I think in that first early phase, it's very high level, light principles, so as not to overwhelm, but also so as to kind of start the journey of governance, if you like. The second phase is, I think usually coincides when you come out of experimentation mode. So I think a lot of organisations are, you'll have a proliferation of proofs of concept, proofs of value, experiments. You want to create almost like a sandbox environment for those teams to just play with the technology and promote that innovation. And so you want to keep your governance guided by those early principles we've set. Still, some checks and balances are needed, but create the safe environment for them to just play in, right? But I think when the rubber really hits the road is when you then take one of those technologies and you start actually applying to real business decisions that are impacting the business, your customers, the employees, or whoever it might be. That's almost the kind of moment of truth for organisations, and it's mandatory at that point. Of course, we have to meet our legal compliance obligations, but by that point, before you cross that threshold from experimentation to real life deployment, you must have a structure in place that you feel is sufficient to get you through that first wave of adoption.
I'm thinking if while you are in the midst of it, you usually don't have the time to reflect. And you realize when it's too late that you didn't clear or you put that governance in place earlier. And while you were talking, I remember a situation where we didn't clarify the data governance. Right? You're talking about there's a data strategy, there's maybe an ethics strategy, but sometimes they don't exist yet, right? They are being developed along the way. So data ownership and that data governance piece. I had a discussion. We were in a board meeting, and the CEO told me, "Well, Kenza, you have to take care of the data, HR data, right? We had a reorganization, and we needed to know how to move people." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" "Well, you are the CTO. It's your responsibility to get the data right." I'm like, "No. I can use what is in SAP."
Yes.
But I don't know how it gets there, and it's not my part, let's say, of the responsibility. It's HR, because my team, the IT team, are not the ones putting the data in there, and that's started an interesting discussion because then HR said, "Wait a minute, no, but the IT is." So it was that back and forth, and we realized. It's not as easy as you think. Who is really responsible for the data and who is governing that process as well?
And in that example, maybe not in that example, maybe in other examples, what do you think works? How do you communicate that, or what are the questions that you ask or conversations that you have to get people on board with playing more of a leading role, taking accountability?
Well, I think having that clarity is really the first step, because what happened after these funny discussions we agreed that we needed a clear process on our joiner mover lever process.
Right.
And while designing or improving that process, we had HR, we had the IT team and the data team sit together, right? And they defined in each part of this process who is doing what.
Sure.
And with introducing that clarity, the data team and data privacy team, they were also part of the discussion. They put their guidelines of what whoever is typing the data in what they should consider. And especially after, people move out, you have to erase all the records and these kind of things. So there is this part of governance getting into the discussion, and basically it started somewhere else. But in the process, we managed to make it.
And it makes me think about the trigger for those real conversations, because in that scenario,
it was a reorg.
It was a reorg.
Totally different thing.
Yes,
totally different.
Yeah. Often it is something's gone wrong, it's very easy for organisations to silently kind of continue with, and particularly when it's very exciting, innovative space like any technological, transformation, but particularly AI. From everybody's perspective, it's really exciting. We just want to get to the value. I think it's going to be very easy to underestimate the importance of having these challenging conversations up front. So when we think about triggers, an organisation wouldn't want an incident or a near miss or, something going wrong to be the trigger for it. But at the same time, who is in that room who should say, actually, let's do it now by design. Let's now talk about between us. Let's start between us as a C-suite. What are we all accountable for? What do I do? What do I expect from you? And kind of almost have that contracting, social contract, or amongst yourselves. Because I think what you said earlier about clarity, particularly of roles and responsibilities, who is the decision maker, how do decisions get taken, those setting and establishing those rules of the game, and then clearly communicating them to your teams is what enables you then to move fast. So I would, my caution would be, don't wait for the trigger. Be the trigger for those conversations.
And what is the role of the CEO in all of this? I mean, we're jumping to the top, but especially when it comes to governance,
yes.
Where do you see that role?
So you might say again that I'm a bit too idealistic here, but I'm going to start with the idealistic position in that I truly believe that CEOs should be playing an active leadership role on the topic of responsible AI. I think it's in many organisations, how AI technology is deployed to deliver value for the organisation is going to be a critical item on the CEO's agenda. And so making sure that that's being done in a safe way to create sustainable value should be, should sit with the CEO, and in my view, it shouldn't be delegated. Although everybody around that C-suite, that CEO's team is there to support him or her to make sure that is delivered well. But I would invite CEOs to think about governance as a tool in their toolkit that enables them to orchestrate the organisation towards high performance when it comes to AI. Good governance doesn't just ensure the organisation is building a safe building, is meeting legal requirements. Good governance is actually making sure that the organisation's operating rhythm and the way it is delivering is actually achieving what the CEO cares about, which is this corporate agenda, corporate strategy. So if you reframe, if you're the CEO and you're thinking, surely this is for the general counsel or the risk officer to deal with, working with technology, and what, I'll just leave them to it. I would say they will do a lot of the work with you and for you, but actually make sure you're proactively having that conversation. Where are we? How's it going? What are the pain points? What can I do to continue to create clarity, be super clear of the prioritization of it as well, and be the proponent, the advocate, because it's important that message is cascading to the rest of the organisation. It's a culture shift, effectively, isn't it, that we're looking for, which surely the CEO should be playing an active role there.
So if CEOs are listening to this conversation, Naureen, what is the one thing they should do in the next week?
I think they should have a conversation with their C-suite, full C-suite, and just go around the room. What are we each accountable for? What's our relationship to this AI transformation that we're in the middle of or that's coming? And what is my accountability, responsibility? I think going around the room and kind of setting that out is a good place to start.
Amazing, because it's quite easy, actually. And that's a practical one. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining the conversation. In the next episode, we'll focus on compliance. See you there.